Today I'm going to tell you two wild stories. The first is about a little-known invasion of a South American country in 1949 that had absolutely insane, unintended consequences. The second story is about a very strange ritual that typically didn't have horrible consequences, but in 1851 it did. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do. We upload 2, 3, even 4 times a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please offer to take the like button on a nice whale-watching cruise. And once you're out in the middle of the ocean, just throw them overboard and leave. Also, please subscribe and turn on all notifications.
On the night of February 12, 1949, a man in his 30s named Leonardo Paez was pacing back and forth inside a radio station in Quito, the capital of Ecuador. It was a Saturday night, and everyone was working with a feverish intensity to prepare for an urgent broadcast. Leonardo was the director of the station, a highly respected outlet owned by a popular newspaper, and he took immense pride in its reputation. Tonight, however, the weight of what they were about to do was making him physically sick. Inside the room, a team of producers and sound technicians were busy organizing stacks of paper. One of the station's top news anchors was double-checking the script he had written himself. Leonardo looked at the clock. It was just past 9 p.m. They were running out of time, but he knew they only had one shot to get this 100% right. The gravity of the moment was palpable. At that moment, the station was broadcasting a live musical performance by a duo named Benitez and Valencia. In 1940s Ecuador, these two were essentially the Taylor Swift of their time. Since there was no TV, radio was the ultimate source of entertainment. Radios were luxury items, so people would bring their sets out onto the sidewalk so that neighbors and passers-by could listen. Leonardo knew that nearly all of Quito's 250,000 residents were tuned in. Leonardo signaled the technicians. With the twist of a knob, the beautiful singing was cut off, and the red on-air sign flashed. The anchor leaned into the microphone and, in a voice dripping with urgency, said, "We are interrupting this program to bring you an alarming event. Ecuador is being invaded." About half a mile away, 17-year-old Jose Antonio was standing outside a restaurant with friends. Suddenly, the music stopped and the announcer screamed, "The city of Latacunga has been destroyed." Jose's heart skipped a beat. Latacunga was only 60 miles south of Quito. The threat was terrifyingly close. Just as abruptly as the news had started, the broadcast cut back to the musical program. People in the streets stood frozen, looking up at the sky for warplanes. Some started making jokes, calling it a prank, while others, like Jose, remained deeply unsettled. The reason Jose was so scared was that Ecuador had actually been invaded by Peru just 7 years earlier in 1941. That war proved to the citizens of Quito that they were largely unable to defend themselves against a foreign power. The trauma of that invasion was still fresh in everyone's minds. The music was cut again. The announcer returned. Update. The enemy has landed aircraft on the outskirts of Quito, in an area called Cotacaleo, just 8 miles from the city center. Jose realized the city was now effectively surrounded from both the north and the south. Suddenly, a new voice came over the air, the chief of the local newspaper. He wasn't calm like the anchor. He was screaming, "The airbase has been taken over and destroyed. They are exterminating everything. They are using poisonous gas and fire. They are coming." The streets erupted in screams and prayers. People began claiming they could see the enemy in the sky. Thousands flooded the streets, crowding around radios. The broadcast became a mess of panicked voices. But one word kept coming, all shouting over each other: "Hide! Then, an authoritative voice took over. It was the mayor of Quito. He confirmed that surrounding cities were under attack and gave a clear instruction: women and children must flee and hide. But the men must stay and fight. Jose, despite being only 17, felt a rush of adrenaline. He decided he was going to fight. As Jose and his friends prepared themselves, the minister of government came on the air with a soul-crushing message: forget what the mayor said about fighting. Our weapons are not powerful enough. There is nothing we can do. We are going to lose. A field reporter came on, screaming for everyone to run. When suddenly his feed cut out, the original anchor returned, his voice shaking. The reporter you just heard has just been killed. Only 21 minutes had passed since the start of the broadcast, and the entire country had spiraled into total madness. People began looting bars to drink before the end, while others crowded into churches. But then, a final update came over the radio. Jose couldn't hear it over the din, but he noticed the crowd around him suddenly stop running. They didn't look relieved, they looked murderous. They began grabbing knives, guns, and torches, heading toward the city center. Inside the Radio Quito studio, Leonardo heard glass shattering on the first floor. Then came the smell of smoke. The crowd, realizing they had been tricked, wasn't going home. They were coming for blood. The anchor pleaded for help over the air, but there was no one left to save them. Leonardo and his team tried to head for the exit, but the first floor was engulfed in flames. Their only option was to go up. From the roof, Leonardo saw the mob with torches and military tanks rolling in. He saw the roof of a nearby school and realized he had to jump. He took a running start, leaped into the air, and crashed onto the school roof. He had made it. While hiding, Leonardo faced the reality. The broadcast was a hoax. It was a localized adaptation of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. Leonardo had waited until the very end to reveal it was fiction, but by then, the city was already burning. The mob burned the station to the ground. Between the fire and the people who took their own lives out of fear of the aliens, the death toll was between 6 and 20 people. Leonardo faced no jail time, but he was forced to flee to Venezuela, his credibility forever destroyed. We now move to Fall River, Massachusetts. In 1851, 23-year-old Bailey Staples was a man who loved his job. He was a psychic medium during the height of the spiritualist movement, making a fortune by communicating with the dead. Bailey was a brilliant fraud. He used hidden hooks under his sleeves to lift and rattle heavy wooden tables, while his hands appeared to be resting on top. On January 26, 1851, he was performing his third seance of the day at the home of John Gardner. He was exhausted, but determined to put on a show. The guests sat around a circular table, touching hands to create a circuit. Bailey dimmed the lights and began his act. He made the table thump and rise off the floor, causing the guests to gasp and scream. He was exerting massive physical strength to keep the table hovering. Suddenly, the room felt icy. Bailey stopped his act and began to tremble. His eyes rolled back until only the whites were visible. The host, John Gardner, thought this was the best acting he had ever seen. But then, Bailey let out a ghostly moan and collapsed violently to the floor. A local doctor, Dr. Hopper, was summoned. He found Bailey in a heap on the floor. He checked for a pulse, but found nothing. "He's dead," the doctor announced. The guests were convinced that the spirits Bailey had summoned had actually claimed his life. The public was so convinced it was supernatural that they tried to block the autopsy, fearing Dr. Hopper would kill Bailey if he was merely in a trance. But when the autopsy was finally performed, the truth came out. Bailey had a pre-existing heart condition, the extreme physical strain of faking the seance 3 times in one day, caused an aneurysm to rupture. He literally worked himself to death trying to prove a lie. 2 stories that prove that words and deceptions have a power that can spiral out of control. Leonardo wanted to be creative and burned a city. Bailey wanted to deceive and ended up creating a legend that cost him his life. Let me know in the comments which story gave you the most chills. And remember, we have hundreds of other stories for you to binge. If you're looking for a recommendation, check out this video right here, point to screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.